Hi guys, welcome to our Facebook Live at the Hayflick Lab. We have Dr. Susan Hayflick, Dr. Penny Hogarth, and they're going to do an overview of kind of what we talked about.
Dr. Odie Seebohm
Dr. Odie
from the Netherlands is joining us via space shuttle.
for 1 in the morning.
Hello.
So they're going to go ahead and do a little overview of some of our questions. I'm assuming touch base like we did, or they did at the conference. Go through some of our questions that I've obtained from you guys, and then we will take questions later on. I'm going to try to follow along on my phone to jot down any as you ask, but we're just trying to stick to the questions that they were given, and we can go from there. So,
how do we know if anybody's on? You're seeing them.
7 people.
Okay, 7. Come on, people. All right. So should we get started? Should we wait a few minutes?
We can go ahead and start.
Yeah. Okay.
And then I know it'll
People
stay up on our page, so
Yeah.
people that
Okay.
are missing it will
Okay.
can access it.
People who are wisely sleeping.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it's Tuesday.
Yeah. Maybe I can get started. I did want to just, many of you have not met Odie. So Odie's on the space shuttle circling Mars right now. Odie's a scientist from the Netherlands who has been a very close collaborator with us for many years now, and is a central figure in the COASY story and in the development of this, along with Penny and myself. And so we thought it was important that she be a part of this, and she felt very strongly as well to be a part of this. And so she's a scientist, not a clinician, but she's very dedicated to the project and seeing this work go forward into humans, into patients, the clinical studies. So so maybe we can start just with a little bit of discussion about, so you know the disease, you know your family members or your loved ones with the disease, friends with the disease, but we thought it would be helpful to just talk briefly about how we think about the disease process, so that when it comes time to talking about what we think COASY, how we think COASY might work, or what we think we might see in a person taking this compound, or actually any of the compounds, it's helpful to refer back to how we think about the disease. And so we're going to start there. We may have, so this is our best understanding today, but we three may have somewhat different understandings of the disease, which is very common for people even who work intimately in an area to have different ideas. And so you guys should feel free to jump in or make your comments. But the way that I think about this disorder, PCAN, is that most of the cells in the body are not troubled by the loss of this gene and the enzyme that it produces. Most of the cells can compensate, most of the organs can compensate, most of the brain can compensate, but there's one set of cells, there's one compartment of the brain that seems not to be able to overcome the absence of this protein, the pantothenate kinase enzyme. And it's those cells that are, we say, selectively vulnerable. They're especially sensitive to this missing enzyme. And they're the ones that we see damage when we have an opportunity to look at a brain after a person dies. We see that they're the ones that show the greatest damage. And so the question is, so the way I think about the disease is that from birth, maybe even from before birth, there are some changes in those cells that they're struggling to overcome this missing enzyme, and that they're sustaining sort of small but increasingly large over time damage that ultimately overwhelms them and means that they're unable to fix themselves. They're unable to retain their health and function normally. And it's really somewhere in that process, I think you can probably lose maybe 50, 60, 70% of their ability before we start to see changes in the person. And so those cells have some resilience, but not enough to overcome this missing enzyme. And so the disease process is it's the way that the body shows us that these cells can't do what they're doing. They're very selective parts of the brain. They're important in controlling movements. They're important in some aspects of emotion and mental health. And they are struggling to do their job. And so this is a progressive change over time. Do they reach a stage of no return? They probably do. Is it mid-disease? Is it late disease? We don't know for sure the answer to that, but there probably is a stage when it would be really hard to get them all back to a stage of health. They're probably not all marching at the same pace. Some are ahead, some are a little bit behind, and we might be able to return some of them to a greater stage of health than others. This is the way that we're thinking about the disease at this time. But the true answer is that we really don't know. So I'm going to stop there and turn it over to my colleagues if you want to add anything to that sort of description. Odie, Penny?
No,
Okay.
that's fine. I think we should
Move on.
the time talking about
Okay.
the trial and such like.
Okay.
You want to ask us questions or tell us what?
Yeah.
However you guys want to do it.
Well,
So, some people had asked questions about what we'd seen in the mice. And I'm actually going to ask Susan to talk about the mice because she spends more time with the mice than I do.
Okay.
So what did we see in the mice that were taking Coazy? And do the mice have dystonia? Do they look like they've got PCAN? And I'm going to let her speak to that.
Yeah. So the reason we even tested this compound in the mice was that Odie had tested this compound in her fruit flies. So she has a colony of fruit flies in her laboratory who have PCAN, and they actually show a lot more of the neurologic features than the mice do. And when she fed Coazy to the fruit flies, they showed some very strong changes that were indicative of improved health. And they spanned many differences. As most of you know, in the mice with PCAN, the mice walk around, they look healthy. They don't show us that they have a neurologic disease. But we have, in the past couple of years, we have finally found a way to measure nerve health changes in the mouse brain. And it's the ability to measure those changes. So it's not a mouse that stumbles around and has dystonia. We don't even see with an MRI, we don't see a lot of iron in the brain. But we have been able to show chemical changes that tell us that there's a problem in vitamin B5, pantothenate, there's a problem in iron, and there's a problem in nerve health. And so it's those chemical changes, we call them biomarkers, that we see in the mouse and that we see returning to a normal or a very near to normal level. We see chemical shifts back to a normal level when we treat the animals with Coazy. And so we're treating them, I made the point when I talked about this in Chicago in May, we gave the animals Coazy and we fixed the CoA problem. We didn't do anything directly to iron or directly to nerve health, but we saw when we corrected the CoA pathway, we saw that the iron and the nerve health corrected themselves. And that was a very powerful signal to us that this was a path forward for a possible treatment in humans. Other things to add? Okay.
For the mice part now.
The mice do not have dystonia, so they do not have the twisting disease. It's when you look at the mouse just walking around in the cage, you can't tell that they have PCAN. But we have a very, very particular way of measuring in their brain, and with that measurement, we can see that they have PCAN. And we can fix that change with the Coazy.
So were they falling off? I can't remember what we talked about before the wheel. Were they on the wheel and they kept falling off?
Yeah, not these mice. Yeah, not these mice. Yeah.
I'm gonna let you just Because you know
Yeah.
you left off or what's
You
gonna.
want to talk about the compound?
Yeah, a little bit. So people have asked, how exactly this compound works. Does it take iron out of the brain like deferoprone? What exactly is it doing? And so in simple terms, it is jumping over the block that exists in pecan. So remember, we have vitamin B5, and we have to change it into something else, and then change it into something else, and change it into something else, and eventually you get this special compound called CoA, and it is that pathway that is messed up in pecan. It's the very first step that is taking vitamin B5 and changing it to the next compound. And so what we're doing is feeding something in further down, and it jumps over that block and allows the brain to, we think, to make CoA based on what we've seen in the mice. So that's how it works. So Susan's already addressed what was meant when we saw the biomarkers go back to normal. Again, this isn't a mouse that had dystonia to start with. So we didn't see the mouse stop having dystonia or get better in the way where we can just look at how it's moving around in the cage. What we did see was in the exact part of the brain that is affected in humans, we saw these chemical changes all return to normal. And that's been what has given us hope that by giving this compound to humans, it would also bring about those changes in the brain. And unlike in the mice who don't have dystonia, we might eventually see some change in the symptoms of somebody with pecan. Now, I do want to just make a comment here that at several points during this Facebook Live event, you're going to hear us say, we just don't know this. We don't know the answer to this question. We don't know the answer to that question. And I want to be totally honest with everybody that it's not that we're being evasive. It's not that we're trying to dodge the questions. It's that there truly is a lot that we don't know about this compound at the moment. You've got to realize it has never been given to humans with pecan at this point. In fact, it's never been given to humans at this point. And so when I say we don't know, it's being totally, completely, absolutely honest with you. I'm not trying to make...
So that's what the trial is.
Because that's what the trial is.
Yeah.
It is jumping right into humans. We are not doing a study in healthy controls first. We think we have the FDA's blessing to go straight into patients who have, or individuals who have pecan. So some drugs, the FDA requires that you do a study first in healthy people who don't have pecan. As of right now, they are not requiring us to do that. They're allowing us to go straight into a clinical trial in humans with pecan. Folks with pecan.
That's good.
Yeah, it is good. So, yeah. So that requires, I think, that we take a bit of a step back, and I think it's going to take both of us making comments here. What does it mean when all those little things fly across the bottom of the screen?
That's.
Is that how you send us love?
I'll show you. I'm just
Could you guys all send us some love right now? Because that's...
So these are all the comments, what people
Yeah.
are saying right now. I'm gonna have to get closer because it's not coming from my phone.
Yeah.
But they're pushing emojis, so they're liking it, they're loving it, that makes them mad, whatever.
Oh boy.
So we like hearts. See hearts.
Uh-oh.
And right
They're
now,
great.
a lot of people have Miller as their
Okay.
profile
Yeah.
picture.
That's
Okay,
awesome.
That's awesome.
Thank you. We are Facebook naive, so that's really helpful to feel the love. Thank you,
I'm
guys.
gonna
Say
take over
that.
here so I can see the questions.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I'll get out of the frame for a minute.
Okay.
Okay.
So starting the trial, is there a projected start date for the CoAZ clinical trial? Dr. Hogarth?
Fine, way to put me on the hot seat. So we don't have an exact date yet, and in order to talk about this, I've got to tell you a little bit about where we are with the compound itself. So when you make something that you want to give to humans, it has to be made in sufficient quantities to be able to launch a clinical trial. And more importantly, it's got to be made to these very exacting standards that the FDA sets. It has to be very pure. We have to know exactly what it is that we have made and are planning to give to people. So when we say we think it's Coazy, we've got to prove that it is just Coazy, that it's not contaminated with anything else. We've got to prove that we're not putting your children at risk by exposing them to this compound. We told you in the information that we put on the website that we have been able to make milligram quantities of this compound so far. And we have a method to be able to make milligram, and now up to, with the help of folks in the Netherlands, now up to gram quantities. That is still a very, very small quantity. So just to give you an idea, an aspirin is 325 milligrams. So we've been able to make milligrams into gram quantities. And the recipe or the method that we use to make that amount of compound, generally speaking, doesn't work when you try to scale it up to make kilogram quantities, really big amounts, enough to be able to supply a clinical trial and supply people around the world. So where we're at right now is we have taken not one, but 3 different methods, 3 different recipes to 2 different companies. We have just put them in front of these 2 different companies in different parts of the world, and they are ready to start the first stage of scaling this up. So going from gram quantities to 20, 50, 100 grams. If they show that one of these 3 methods is suitable for scaling up to that level, then I think we'll be ready to scale up to kilogram levels. Now, all of this process takes a while. We have had estimates anywhere from 5 months up to 12 months, I think, to be able to scale this up. There is still a question, though, that if we've got to get to that 20 to 50 gram stage first and demonstrate that, yes, this can be scaled up. That's where we're at right now. So what does that mean for the clinical trial? Both companies have given us what they are calling very conservative estimates, meaning that they're not their most optimistic estimates of time, they're their least optimistic estimates of time. And so it is possible that it will go faster. But I don't want to make any promises that it will. We do know that once we've got pure compound, that we've been able to test it to the FDA's requirements, we will be able to move very quickly into clinical trials. Unlike some drugs, where the FDA requires that it be tested in not just mice, but in larger animals, that it go through very extensive testing. The FDA has told us that with the information that we've got so far, once we have a scale-up method, and once we've shown that what we've made is truly pure, we have it in a form that people can take, we will be able to go into clinical trials.
Swiftly. Yeah. Have we answered that question? So you feel like you know?
This is where the mad faces come flying across.
Well,
So probably not sooner than 6 months. Hopefully not too much longer than that, but we don't know. The answer is we don't know. We're not being cagey.
it's probably every question we get asked.
Yeah,
about.
we wish we could tell you exactly when, but we don't. That's just the best that we can, that's the best we can tell you today.
So don't be mad, no mad faces.
Maybe a few sad ones. We're sad.
grateful
wish
that
it
we
would
have
go
them.
faster. Yeah.
If there was anything that we could do to move this faster, we absolutely would.
Well, and we have. You've enabled us to do this parallel process because of your fundraising efforts, where we don't have to just choose one and take a gamble on one method. We are we're hedging our bets by taking a gamble on 3 methods, and we think that that will get us there faster. So that's why we're doing that.
So that was a very big decision financially for us, for us on your behalf, is we had to decide, do we spend more money to test 3 methods in parallel to hedge our bets, to back on more than one horse? Or do we try to save our money and move just one method forward, one recipe forward? And we made a conscious decision between the three of us
Yeah.
that it was better to spend more money at the front end so that we would feel more confident that we would have something at the end. You know, it's just
I agree.
So a couple of questions have come up. I just want to make the point. We think the FDA won't stop us. We're just working on developing the compound. So Penny has forged a relationship with the FDA that is incredibly strong and incredibly effective.
That's good.
You know, it's. I never thought I'd say this, but I feel really good about paying my taxes because the FDA has totally risen to the occasion on this project, and they are pulling for us. They're pulling for all of you. I did also want to some questions had come up about the fundraising, and since we're talking about funds, you guys have been doing amazing work out there. I know that some of you are sort of midstream with your fundraising, and so keep up the good work. Some of you have turned in really amazing efforts, and so I don't remember what the total is. I think we're getting close to 200,000 in the thermometer. If you have any questions about whether your donations have gotten to us, I personally thank every single donor and send a tax receipt. And so if people are not getting those, then please let me know. But every single donation is being acknowledged directly by me.
And you might talk a little bit about the lag time from some money
Yeah.
landing in PayPal donate but showing up on the thermometer, because I think that's a concern. for
Yeah,
people.
so we're trying to do just batch moving of funds, but I am trying, now that we've got a little bit of a system down. It took us, I mean, even just having to figure out how to do a system. I'm not a professional tracker of funds, treasurer. We now are batching it, and every week you should get a pretty accurate report of what we have in hand received. And so if you have any questions about it, please don't hesitate to contact us. You can contact Allison, you can contact me, and we can answer your questions specifically.
Before we move on from the clinical trial, I see there are some questions coming in live and also questions that were submitted ahead of time about the eligibility, meaning who can be in this trial. Basically, we are making sure that this clinical trial will be open to every person with PCAN. So there's no trait, no wheelchair, no age, no degree of advanced disease.
Everyone.
There's nothing that would stop somebody from being in this trial. And I want to talk a little bit about how the study will be done. This is something that we also got questions about. But we know that travel is incredibly hard on families and is very hard on children with PCAN and adults with PCAN. It takes a toll on them, and sometimes it makes their disease worse.
Even just us going to 5 hours.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Courtney drove here 5 hours, and her little guy doesn't enjoy that and doesn't do well with that. And so our goal in designing this clinical trial was to make it as easy as possible for people to do it. So the way this trial will work, anybody can come in. We will ask you to complete information online in your own home or your local library if you don't have online, but if you're talking to us, this group does. To complete some questionnaires and such online, to talk to us once in a while on the telephone, and to get blood drawn locally. This could be at a local lab or at your local provider's office. We will send you kits that you would take to your local doctor or your local lab. We can help facilitate this. Your blood will be drawn, it'll be sent back to us. There's nothing that gets billed to insurance or anything like that. And that is the way this study will work. There's no travel to some center that is hundreds of miles from you or even a few miles from you. The idea is that you would do all of this clinical trial in your own home and community.
So we talk about starting in the US and then expanding,
Yeah.
but expanding quickly. So Mila's asked about everywhere, question mark?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Wait, I have an offer to move to Australia. That is very tempting, especially right now.
Yeah.
So we are sort of required to start in the US because the FDA is the agency that I think much of the rest of the world is going to look to for guidance and direction. And because, we're here and, we have to start in the US. But our goal is to very quickly, before, not years down the road, but very quickly, assuming we can work out the logistics and the funding, to be able to conduct a clinical trial in much the same way in every country where there is somebody living with PCAN. Namely, people in Europe would complete assessments online, people in Australia would complete assessments online. You would have to have a local provider who would draw blood. You would have to have computer access and a commitment to complete those assessments. And then we would ship drug to a provider or to you directly in the country in which you live. Now, obviously, I say that it's a pretty complicated process. But the idea is that the trial would be kind of under the direction or the auspices of the Food and Drug Administration in the US, and that we would be negotiating with individuals in each particular country. We would not have to set up a multi-center, multinational clinical trial. It would be all coordinated from the US with local providers helping with that. In Europe, we are hoping that center in Europe would be in the Netherlands, in Dr. Sabone's, in Odie's neck of the woods in the Netherlands. And that the Netherlands would be sort of the hub for Europe. Australia, we would do something. We would find somebody in Australia who would be our sort of point person in the same way. But our intent is that no one would be limited access to this compound. And we hope to do that pretty quickly after the US trial or the North American trial is started.
So it's a good time for us to make a plug that the thing that you all can be doing now, if you haven't already, and I know most of you have, so is to enroll in the PCAN Ready study and provide us with the natural history information about your loved one, because that's one of the most important steps for people coming into the trial, is that we have some baseline information about you before anything happens.
And it's something that the FDA is looking for. Mm-hmm. So if we can hold up to the FDA numbers of people who are enrolled in the natural history study and who are completing their assessments more or less on schedule, that is giving us credibility for our plan to not do this like a traditional clinical trial. We've made a case to the FDA that we can do this because we have an online natural history and we have people who are willing to enroll in this and are willing to complete their assessments.
Yeah.
So we really actually need you to be able to do that. It will serve you in the long term for this compound.
And you still think that the FDA, they're on board, that the sister organizations in other countries will follow us back?
I do. I think that, again, if we can coordinate a trial, a study from the US and start to distribute it around the countries of the world, that those organizations, the equivalents of the FDA in Australia, in Europe, in Germany, in Netherlands, in France, Spain, I think those countries will very quickly follow suit.
Gotcha.
So I want to just answer a couple of the questions. Yes, India, I would say. We don't know a lot about the regulatory aspects of India, but we know that there are a lot of people in India with pecan, not more than anywhere else, but it's a country with a very large population. And so it's a priority for us to also be able to offer access to the compound and access to the trial for people in India. So there's a lot of questions about what's being called the OTC drug or the OTC med, over the counter, and we will talk about that, but I'm going to put that at the end so that we can keep the focus on Coazy right now. Yeah, but we will talk about that. Did you want to talk about the placebo versus not placebo stuff? So maybe I can just make a comment. So Odie is the person who kind of discovered this and came up with the idea initially. In my laboratory, we tested it in the mouse and really got our feet firmly on the ground as believers in this. But Penny's expertise is in taking compounds into people and doing the clinical trial. And so she's going to be the one who's going to be leading this clinical trial. So it would be her design.
Well, Susan's going to be right here with me.
I'll be, carrying the bags, delivering the stuff. Yeah.
Should we do the mailing of the stuff to
Yeah.
you all? I think, I don't know. So there are some questions about how the study is designed. So as it stands right now, the way the clinical trial would work is, yes, there is a placebo. It is for 6 months with 18 years of open label.
18 months.
18 years. 18 months.
Of the whole cow.
18 months up, so a total of 2 years, with the first 6 months involving a placebo arm. And during that 6 months, 3 people would get active compound, would get Coazy, 1 person would get placebo. So a 3-to-1 randomization is what we call that, just for 6 months. And then everybody goes on to, after 6 months in the trial, everybody would go on to Coazy. So it could be that you would get, so 3/4 of the people will get Coazy for the whole 2 years. 1/4 of the people will get Coazy, will get placebo for 6 months, followed by Coazy for 18 months.
Yeah. Okay.
And I know it's hard to get your head around a placebo-controlled trial. Everybody wants to get the active compound. But it's the only way that we can really demonstrate that there's no difference in safety, which is the first aim of this study, is to figure out, is this safe in people? And we hope, is there any difference in efficacy? Does it work any better? It's the only way for us to do that.
Double blind, right?
It will be double
Yeah.
blind. We won't know who's getting the active compound and who's getting placebo. We made it as generous a sort of distribution as we possibly could. And it is, I don't want to say it's only for 6 months, because you all are living with pecan, and 6 months can seem like an eternity. But the FDA requires that we do it this way. And I think that we believe that it will tell us, in a way that will serve the whole community and your children individually in the long term, to know that this is safe, and I hope that it is effective in the long term.
So Patricia's question, the FDA hasn't formally approved the 3-to-1. They are actually currently evaluating the protocol, and so we don't have an answer on that yet. And Laura has asked if there's a drastic change, would they come off of the placebo and go on?
That's a really good question, Laura. So we have what is called an independent data and safety monitor, who is a physician who is not involved in the clinical trial. And that person gets to look at the data in an unblinded way and to look at safety signals. So what would prompt a so-called breaking of the blind, meaning we would move out of it, is actually less about whether there was a dramatic improvement than about if there was a big difference in safety. So if it looked as though the people getting the drug were suffering adverse consequences of taking the drug, that would prompt an early termination of the placebo arm. If there was a dramatic reversal, I think that we would go back to the FDA at that point. I have to be totally honest, though. I don't know if we will see that. I think there's a lot of things that we just don't know. I prefaced my comments by saying that we just don't know how this will affect PCAN in the near term. Like, you start taking the thing, is somebody going to get up and walk out of their wheelchair the next day? I don't think that's very likely myself. I think this is going to be a very slow change. And so I want to try to encourage people to not set the expectation that their child or their loved one is going to turn around overnight. I think this is something that is going to take being on the stuff for quite a while before you start to see the damage that has taken place during all those years start to reverse itself.
So I think of it as a little bit of the disease has this momentum. It's this mass of momentum. You can think of it as a 60-car train or a huge ship, and what it takes to actually turn it around to be going in the other direction. The first thing you have to do is you have to slow it, and then you have to get to a stop, and then you have to figure out how to turn it around. And it's a lot of, we're asking a lot of the human body. I will say that kids' brains are amazing, and they're amazing at healing themselves. We don't know the answer to the question of what we can expect, but we don't think we're going to see changes within hours, probably not within days, weeks, maybe, but it might take weeks and months to really start to see changes. And what the changes might be is very subtle at first until we start to see that the ship's been turned or that the train has been turned. And it's going to take some time to get to that point. This is uncharted waters. We don't know the answer to these questions. But there are other examples in medicine, including disorders where there's a high accumulation of iron in parts of the brain, where the disease has been able to be turned around and people are able to regain an amazing amount of function. And so, in the absence of knowing the answers to this, my view is that we remain positive, we remain optimistic, because we don't know.
Yeah, you have to be positive too.
Yeah.
I want to go the other way. I see a question from Melinda. She wants to know about compassionate use. Is that something that can be started with trials or well advanced?
Yeah, so we've set up the eligibility criteria for the trial to try to ensure that nobody would be denied access to the trial. So sometimes compassionate use refers to when there's a study going on and somebody doesn't meet criteria for the study. But compassionate use after the end of a study, absolutely. Our goal is to have this continue, to have it be uninterrupted for people. Now, how exactly that'll work, we haven't got that far yet, but we absolutely are committed to that. You guys know, everybody knows, because we've been talking a lot about it, we are absolutely committed to try to keep the cost of this as low as possible, so that even if somebody doesn't have insurance or doesn't have a means to pay for it, that the cost is not going to be prohibitive, and that perhaps the fundraising efforts can support even people who can't afford even a modest cost. But our goal in setting up this model with the two foundations, Spoonbill Foundation and Stichting Lepela in the Netherlands, is to try to ensure that cost alone is never going to be a barrier to anyone anywhere in the world who has PCAN to get this compound.
So maybe I can respond about deferiprone. Our current thinking is that it's not necessary. In fact, we don't want people to change what they're doing. We want them, whatever you're on, possibly with the exclusion of other experimental compounds, which I'll address in just a minute, we want you to sort of stay the same. And so if you're on deferiprone, you should stay on deferiprone. If you're on a slew of other medications, ideally you should stay on those medications, and there wouldn't be a lot of changes in the lead up to that time. We don't think, one of the things that has come out of the deferiprone trial is that deferiprone seems to be safe at the doses that it's being used in most of the people with PCAN, and so deferiprone can continue. Will there need to be a washout period? Can you be in both the FORT study and the COASY study? All I know about the FORT study is what you know, is what's in the public domain, and most of the time it's not a good idea to be in two studies. In fact, I'd be surprised. You can't be.
Yeah. So I want to chime in there.
Okay.
There's actually safety reasons why we would not want people to be in two studies. So both the REO24 compound and COASY are intervening in this pathway. And this is a situation where doing that too
Couldn't
much.
get reliable data.
Well, it's not just about the data, it's actually
Yeah.
a safety concern.
Yeah.
So if you plaster that pathway with too much stuff, it's not a good thing.
Yeah.
We have reasons to believe that it would actually not be a safe or a good thing to be overdoing correction of this pathway. It might seem like it would be, but you got to realize it's really tightly managed by the body in somebody who doesn't have PCAN. And so if we are overriding that control by putting a drug downstream past the block, then we're messing with a very delicate system. And if you blast that with too much stuff, you might really do some damage. So, this is one of those places, Susan said at the beginning, we might not agree with each other about everything. I would say pretty strongly that I don't think you can be in both studies.
Yeah.
We're not saying you should or should not be in the FORT study. If anybody wants to be in the FORT study, go for it. But if you are in the FORT study and you decide you want to be in our study, that is the one situation where we would ask that people wash out. Any study that you come into, you can drop out of. It is a fundamental tenet of good research practice that research is voluntary. You should never feel compelled or pressured to be in any research. If you start in a study, whether it's our study or the Lutrophin study, and you decide you don't want to be in it anymore, it is absolutely your right to drop out of it. And we'd encourage you to exercise that right if that's what you want to do. But if you start in the FORT study and you decide you want to be in the COASY study, we will probably ask for a washout period purely for safety reasons.
Yeah.
So
We don't know, Patricia's asking and Chris is asking the duration of the washout. We don't know at this stage. We'll have a better sense, I think, when we know a little bit more about the FORT study, if we ever know more about the FORT study. But we'll deal with that in the lead up to it. I can't imagine it would be a lot longer than a 30-day.
I mean, we know already from the mice how long it takes to wash out of COASY. We did that experiment, and it's actually very quick.
Yeah.
But we have no information about the REO24 drug, and so we will have to just make our own best guess.
Yeah.
I do want to return to one thing that Susan said about the other drugs that you're on. Indeed, coming into a clinical trial, we would ask that people don't change their drugs. And if it is possible that during the first 6 months, the drugs can stay the same, it makes it easier, our job easier, to try to look at the effects of COASY in isolation, if that makes sense. But if dystonia is getting better, then it will be up to your local treating physician to decide what is the best combination of dystonia drugs for your kid to be on. And it is we will just want to record that, any changes in medication. So I don't think it's going to be, we're going to make any mandate that all of the other drugs that your child is on need to stay the same for the duration of the trial. We know that we can't do that. And if your kid's dystonia is getting better, or conversely, some other symptom or dystonia is getting worse, then those symptoms have to be managed with the appropriate medication management. So you would carry on with your drug management just as you normally would. And if dystonia is getting better on Corazy, then absolutely, we'd like those drugs to be weaned off, weaned down, and we'd like to know about it. We will be collecting information about drugs all the way through the study.
I'm just gonna put a reminder out here. A couple people are asking independent questions about their family members. We're trying to keep it in general because we'd be here all night. Because we all want to gleam off there. So, Jess, if you do have
We have to get back to the lab to work on Coazy.
Yeah.
Actually, that piece is largely done.
If you want a detail about your child or loved one, they were going to post some links on our the page to get a hold of them separately. So just a reminder for in general.
So I can jump in and talk about the FDA-approved drug, what some have referred to as the OTC drug. OTC stands for over-the-counter. It's actually not an over-the-counter drug. It's a prescribed drug. So this was an idea, and you know, we're pretty forthcoming with you when we have ideas. We want to share our hope with you, but sometimes we are on a path that is an idea that doesn't actually bear out once we get into the lab, and that seems to be what's happened with this FDA-approved drug. It's a drug that is used for other purposes, and I had the idea that it might have benefit based on some results we had in the pecan mouse. And when we tried it, we've now fed it to the mice and done a series of experiments with this compound and some related compounds. This is not Coazy. This is a wholly separate, unrelated compound. It did not do what we had thought it would do based on somebody else's publications. And so it's taught us some things about the brain in the pecan mice. It is not a path forward to my eyes at this time. And so we're not continuing to devote resources to it. We're not recommending that people be on it now. And we are, you know, we've kept all of the work on Coazy going full steam throughout this time, but we're now directing all of the resources to Coazy, because that's where we do see in the mouse everything we want to see. So if you were to ask me in the mouse, in the fly, are you seeing what you want to see in a compound that you see as the most promising thing to move into humans? We're seeing everything we want to see. There's nothing I want to see in the mice that I'm not seeing
With Coazy.
with Coazy. It's safe. It's doing what we want it to do quickly. So it's that's where all of our energy is going now. Yay! Well, it's still, I mean, if you reflect on it, I know everything takes longer than you want, but if you reflect on it, we couldn't have had this conversation a year ago, right? Think about 2 years ago where we were. Some of you came and your kids were just diagnosed 2 years ago. Think about where we were 2 years ago. It's absolutely amazing to me. 26 years I've been studying this disease. It's so amazing to me that in my lifetime, we can be having this conversation. So I know 6 months is too long. I know 12 months is too long. We're working as fast as we can, but it's amazing that we even have this opportunity to be mad about it being 6, 12 months. That's an amazing thing.
I remember just a year and a half ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
we were going to follow up and suggest that we come back to you, and I mean we try to keep you informed as things unfold anyway, but if there's a need, if it would be good for the community to come back with a more formal update, we'd be happy to do this again if you think it's been helpful. Send the love across the screen. That's a good thing for us to that's a feel good thing. It seems not to cost anything. Do you have to buy those hearts?
I don't know. We'll send them. Let's see. Any other questions?
I just got to tell the group something nice that just happened to tell me about my sister.
Oh yeah.
So my sister who is in England, is having a big birthday coming up next year, and she she's gotten kind of caught up in this story with me, and so she is asking all of her guests, in lieu of any gifts for her big birthday, that they come to her party, but they make donations to Spoonbill Foundation.
Woohoo! Yay! No better cause.
I know a lot of people are, we have some on the line, I'm hoping.
Yeah.
Lumber companies.
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
I see the-
People in the queue. Odie, did you want to say anything to the group? Is there anything you want to add?
No, I think it's fine.
Okay.
You did everything very well.
Okay.
I agree.
Thank
Probably
you.
sleep and it's 1 in the
No,
morning.
Odie, it was terrific that she was able to join us.
It's the middle of the night in Europe, practically.
So Neil is asking how much are the funds slowing us now? I would say the funds today are not slowing us. So we have what we need to make the company, to get the companies ready to do this initial push. This initial push, we're going to burn through a lot of money really fast, but it's the right thing to do. And so as fabulous as you've been in fundraising, we are nowhere near done. So keep up the great work. You're just amazing. You're amazing.
I have a question. But,
Yes.
I know
Wait, you're not allowed to ask a question.
I know. I know you have a couple of the pharmaceutical companies in manufacturing. Is there one that's we're rooting for more than the other, or
No,
are they about
actually,
this?
we're very much open at the moment.
Yeah.
So one of the pharmaceutical companies, and it's actually not exactly a pharmaceutical
Yeah.
company, these are chemical synthesis
Yeah.
companies. One of them is a very big worldwide company and is looking at 2 pretty different methods for us. And the other is a company in the Netherlands. It is a smaller company, but still a very substantial size company. And they are looking at one method, chemical method there. And so we are,
3 horses in
yeah,
the
we
race.
are totally, agnostic. We don't have a bigger bet on one horse versus
Gotcha.
the other at the moment.
Yeah.
I think that's true, isn't it, Odie? That we're not betting any more money on one horse than another one.
They have both very good chances.
Yes. Yeah.
But we are standing in the grandstand and woo, woo, woo,
Yeah.
cheering
them on. Yeah.
Nothing would be better than for it to be a dead heat at the finish line.
So a couple of questions about the startup trial, but you pretty much answered that. 6 months till production, then how long to start the trial?
Yeah.
But
You know,
God bless you, everybody says.
We need all the help we can
We have
get.
lots of hearts and thank yous.
Thank you.
And thanks for the hard work.
Yeah.
More fundraisers. Yeah, I posted this on it yesterday, but somebody told me about this little boy. I think he 15 years old, rented or bought a cotton candy machine, rented a $3,000 spot at the fair, and earned $30,000 in like 4 days. I'm like, we all need to buy cotton candy.
Wow.
I was like, wow.
Very cool.
I
think we're good. Yeah,
Anybody else? Last call.
We've
We'll
covered
always
them.
probably do this again.
If you do have specific questions about your own child, a family member, you can direct them to us. Puneet will put at the NBI Care website. We can answer questions there. You can send them to Allison. We're very willing to answer them. We just wanted to use this forum for the group questions around
We'll be here
COASY
till tomorrow
primarily.
too. You can always message us. Too.
Yep.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Take care.
From all around the world.
Good to feel the love. Thank you. Yeah.
Bye, guys.
All right. Bye-bye.